Good evening. Hello. My name is Siobhan Locke, and I want to welcome you to the public forum on the Homeless Resource Centers. Thank you very much for giving us your time tonight and to be here to hear more about the developments since the last time we've been out and chatting with people. Tonight is the first in a series of public engagement that's happening this week. So tonight we have this public forum, which we'll be answering some of the questions that we didn't have answers to back in January, and we'll have a couple of people coming up to talk about that. And then we'll also be introducing the initial design of the Homeless Resource Centers, so the first concepts that are not yet final. Then tomorrow there's an on-site open house at the 700 South site. So that is an open house style event where you can come and talk, have feedback on the design more directly, talk and have some one-on-one conversations. Then followed by on Thursday at St. Vincent de Paul, there's a client-focused, so for individuals experiencing homelessness, there's a client-focused event in the morning, and then in the afternoon, the High Avenue site will also have an on-site open house. So right there at the site, similar to the event for 700 South on tomorrow, is an open house style event where we'll want to hear feedback on the design, and you'll have an opportunity to talk one-on-one with some of the Salt Lake City staff members. So for tonight, the agenda's up here. Basically, it breaks down to half of our evening will be spent in presentation, hearing from some of our panelists, and also seeing some of the design for the first time. And then we hope to spend half of our time answering some of the questions. I hope you had an opportunity to participate and write your questions up as you joined us. If you haven't yet, please see some of the staff, any staff member in the back. They can help you to get your questions up if you walked in tonight. The intention of that is just to answer the questions that the most people have here tonight. Also, our staff and panelists will stick around after the event, so you'll have an opportunity to chat with people one-on-one after the Q&A as well. And also to give feedback on the design that you'll see. And so, my role as the moderator, you won't see me a whole lot, but you'll hear from your speakers, and then I will help to moderate the Q&A. You will see me watch time, and you will see me just help to try and get as many questions answered as well as we can in the time that we have. So if you see me cut off any of our panelists or do anything, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to make sure that we do the very best we can with the time that you're giving to us tonight. So with that, I will pass the time to Mayor Biskupski.
Well, good evening, and thank you for coming this evening. We are very much looking forward to having a very engaging and informative conversation on the next steps for the new resource centers. I also want everyone to know that we will have on-site open houses tomorrow and Thursday that we hope you will attend as well. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our panel and speakers this evening. First, we will hear from former Salt Lake City Mayor Palmer DePaulis, who will provide a brief overview of the site selection process. Mayor DePaulis was the co-chair of the Site Selection Commission, which helped develop the criteria used in selecting the sites and to ensure the new resource centers are truly spaces of hope. After Mayor DePaulis, we will hear from Kathy Bray on the new service model. She is responsible for the overall management, fiscal stability, and strategic direction of the organization of Volunteers of America. She is a certified social worker and current president and CEO of that organization. She has more than 25 years of experience in direct client service and administration of homeless and substance abuse related programs. And lastly, we will hear from Jill Jones, who is the founder of AJC Architects, to talk about the programming and design of the new resource centers. We are excited to have AJC on this project. They have a great history in our city, including the YWCA campus that we see downtown, The YWCA, which includes a resource center for women, has been a critical part of the renewed vibrancy of the 300 South corridor. Following her remarks, we will be joined by Shelter the Homeless Executive Director, Janelle Fluckinger. Did I say that right? Fluckinger. There's an N in here. I did not put that in there. Mike Chief Brown and Councilmember Andrew Johnston, who will be with me on this panel this evening. So thank you again for being here. I don't think we have long-winded people on this panel. We should be able to get to a lot of your questions this evening. I'm very excited for that. So thank you again for coming.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Palmer DePaulis, former mayor of Salt Lake City, and actually have been with this homeless issue for some time now, maybe 30 years or so. Mayor, thank you for all you're doing for the issue, and thank you for that very nice overview. I just wanted to take a moment and talk about the history of our commission, which is like trying to give you the history of the world in about 5 minutes. So I'll do my best, but I think I want to highlight a couple very important things that the commission was able to do. And that, the first thing is, it was very important to pulling all of these diverse individuals together who had many positions on this issue, pull them together and get them to a place where they could leave their positions. And by positions, I mean, I want this to close or I want it to stay open. You know, people will have a position when they come at something, and get them to get deep into their interests. And that was the thing that made this entire process of bringing about a decision for a model, a service model, and guided the site selection process itself. And so what I really want to say is, when people come at this process, and I would encourage you to really think about this, because this is what we did as the process for our commission. When you come at this, try to step aside of any positions that you have and think about the very interests that underlie everything. For example, in our process, the fundamental big interest that came about in this process was the word safety. Safety was what everyone, whether you were a business owner, a resident, an advocate, a homeless person, that was what was on everyone's mind. And that, when they could step away from their positions and start talking about their interests, that's when we were able to build consensus, and that's where we found common ground that led to the criteria for what this new resource center should look like, and have a set of values that it was based on, and also have a sense of what are the commitments you want to make to the community, to the neighbors, to the business people, and to the homeless themselves. So our process really led up to a new service model that Kathy will talk about in just a second, but the process itself that allowed us to get there with consensus from this very diverse group that Gail and I chaired for over 2 years, I believe, Mayor, and with Mayor's help as well, as to guide us in particularly in the second year when you came on board, Mayor. That was what made it successful. That was the process. People became grounded in their interests and not their positions. And by doing that, it allowed them to open up and find common ground. So thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me, Mayor. And I'd like to turn the time over to Kathy Bray, who will talk about the model we developed based on those interests.
Well, there it is. We, Hello, I'm so glad to be with you tonight. I'm Kathy Bray. I'm the President and CEO for Volunteers of America, but I can't take credit for this by myself. Several of the service providers, in particular service providers who have operated residential centers, including emergency shelters, came together to try to provide a visual for people in our community as they had the questions about what is going to happen, what are the services going to be like in the resource centers going forward. You might know that Volunteers of America does have a resource center for homeless youth, so we did use our experience with that, as well as you said, 25 years, yep, been around a long time, but really seriously evaluated the needs of homeless individuals who would be coming to the resource centers and looking at our experience and talking a lot about how are we best going to make this work to move people out of homelessness and back into the community. So I would say that we have it set up in some circles that are a little difficult to see up here, but what I'll do is go through it quick. It's an individual and family-centered model so that the people who are in need of assistance are in the center and the focus is there. Around that, you'll see 8 categories that are the impact areas that we're focusing on. Safety, certainly being one. We've got housing, definitely an issue. We need more affordable housing. And we're also looking at legal rights, wellness, community engagement, positive social support, education, and employment. So in our evaluation of the resource center model, we will continue to make improvements to this model as we get input and keep evaluating it. The next ring, if you will, that's helpful, thank you. It's a little lighter of a yellow color. We're proposing that those are the types of things that would happen within the resource centers. Now we will have staff operating the resource centers, and then we will also have partnerships with organizations in the community who can bring services in, and then we want to bridge people out into the community, which is the final blue circle. So the idea is that we would bring them in, keep them safe, provide some basic services, of course, shelter, food, clothing, and then move into the arenas that are most appropriate for the populations who would be served in the center. So we'll have homeless youth, we'll have single women, we'll have single men, and then we'll have another facility that has both single men and single women in the same building. So I just wanted to let you know that we are seriously looking at how are we going to serve the individuals who are coming to the new resource centers to best help them move out of homelessness as soon as possible. So this is what the model looks like, and I'll be also on the panel. Please take note of best practice interventions. There are many best practice interventions that the service providers receive regular training on, and that does include coordinated entry, which is currently being designed, motivational interviewing, trauma-informed care, case management, and other individual support, diversion from shelter whenever we can, absolutely. Housing first is definitely a model that's been successful with chronically homeless individuals, at least. Low barrier shelters, so we really want to provide a safe place and 24/7 staff supervision for the people in our community who ended up homeless for different variety of reasons, and provide them a path to move out of homelessness and back into the community as safely and as supported as possible. So that's basically the model, and then I'll be on the panel as well, and I'll stick around a bit if anyone has any questions. And then I have the pleasure of introducing Jill Jones, who is going to be doing an overview of the facility designs where these resources will occur.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I know that this is probably why the majority of you are here tonight, to see how these are shaping up, what they look like, what type of spaces are going to be in the building. I'm equally excited to share this with you. This has been quite an adventure for myself and my firm. We're just very involved in making these as successful buildings and solutions for the community as possible. But before I get into the actual, let me see if I'm pushing it forward or backwards. Yeah, there we go. Before I get into the actual design, I want to explain a little bit about our process and how architects think and work. We're meeting with and talking to over hundreds of people, literally over the past 8 weeks. I bet we've talked to almost 200 people, and we keep hearing similar words and similar descriptions every time we talk to someone about these new resource centers. And we use that as inspiration. It's hard to take all these words, but we've dialed it down to 8 really important key words that we use as kind of our vision statements. So whenever we're designing pieces or parts of these buildings, or if we're struggling about should it be this way or that way, we always go back and we touch base on some of these words. Our first word is humane. In designing resource centers, it's very important to us to make sure that they're not feeling institutional and cold, and that they're warm and they're welcoming and that there's dignity involved into the design. The next word is connected. It's important for these resource centers to have connections not only to the communities that they're located in, but also within the centers themselves. The clients need to feel connected with the support services that are there. The staff, the volunteers need to have this sense of connection. And it's how we kind of layer these services throughout the building to make sure that we hit on this word, connected. Contextual is also very important. It's important that the 2 Salt Lake City centers are contextual to the neighborhoods that they're located in, to the community, that they fit in, that there's a pedestrian scale, that the materials are important. So making sure that through our design process that we integrate these facilities very well into the surroundings and having them blend and be part of the neighborhoods. Safety. Palmer touched on this word, a critical word. Safety for the clients, for their respect, for their dignity, but also for the community. It's a two-way conversation when we're dealing with safety for the design and development of these projects. And then flexible. It's important that as the programs within these resource changes grow and evolve, that the space supports them. There needs to be enough flexibility as different providers come in and out of the facilities. There needs to be enough flexibility as the needs of the clients and the needs of the communities change. So building and designing flexibility into these facilities, also very critical. And then durable, making sure that we're using the right materials on the inside and the outside. We want to make sure that our first dollar investment is well spent so that there's low maintenance or no maintenance, and that the durability and that these buildings and facilities look good throughout the life of their involvement in the community. And choosing the right materials will help with the durability of the buildings. Trauma-informed design. If you can imagine yourself, and I've been trying to do this and I can, if you can imagine yourself what it would take for any of you to become homeless right now. Something traumatic is putting people in this position. And how can we as designers support a building or provide a building that provides what we call trauma-informed design? You know, people are here because something significant and likely very bad happened to them in their lives. The building, the space, the materials, the colors, the amount of daylight, how the spaces relate to each other, they all have to be carefully thought of and carefully coordinated to make sure that the space supports what folks have gone through and that we can support a healthy environment. And through that, there are many trauma-informed design principles that we've incorporated into these floor plans. Sustainable. Not only for the reason of sustainable design in regards to energy efficiency, healthy environments, choosing the right materials, making sure there's proper daylight, but sustainable over the long term of the situation and the problems of homelessness, and making sure that, again, the building, and I'm here to talk about the building and the architecture, supports a sustainable program so that these centers can be successful for 20, 30, 40 years. Now, what makes these resource centers different than the word shelter, and I had a conversation today about this, is the type of programs and spaces that are going to be in these facilities. Yes, there's going to be the shelter component, the bunk room, the place for sleeping. the place for showers and hygiene and restrooms. That is certainly going to be part of these facilities, as well as client laundry. But then there's the intake process. The intake process is going to be very different. What's different about these facilities is they are being designed to keep our homeless clients on site and hopefully in the buildings all day and getting the resources and the help that they can get back on their feet. And then if they need to go to other facilities, other resources, other providers, there'll be means to get them to those facilities also. So the intake is going to be different. As a homeless client, you will have, on your first day at one of these resource centers, a bit of time to go through the process and intake and security and ID. But then once you are through that process, you're in. You don't have to go through that daily. You're not going to be removed from the facility at 9 o'clock and told to go somewhere else for a meal. You're not going to be asked to stand in line for your next meal. You're not going to be asked to stand in line to get in and have a bunk for the night. These are resource centers, and the intent is that once you're in the facility, you'll have many of the resources that you need to get back on your feet. Another big difference and distinguishing item on these facilities is we're trying to keep as much of client storage needs inside the building. Many of our homeless clients have bikes, and if they don't have a safe, secure place to put their bike, they may not come to the resource center. So we're having inside bike storage. They have their own, sometimes all of their earthly belongings with them. So yes, there'll be a place under their bunk to put their personal belongings, but there will also be inside the building a place for their personal storage. And again, we're trying to think differently than what our existing buildings are providing. Here's a big step on how these turn into actual resource centers. There's going to be common areas and community and day use spaces. There's going to be places for a computer lab. There's going to be charging stations because even though you're homeless, a lot of homeless clients still have technology. There's going to be a place to receive mail. It's hard to be employed if you don't have an address. So this will be a temporary address to help with employment. There'll be classrooms, multi-purpose rooms. There'll be an inside common area, and then there's going to be outside secure courtyard area for inside and outside day use. This is where it really takes a big step forward, and that we're going to be providing places and offices and conference and meeting rooms for case managers, for service providers. Providers such as the 4th Street Clinic is going to be bringing their mobile medical unit to these facilities, and they'll have clinics, health clinics, so that, again, we can keep our homeless clients at the facilities as much and get the services they need. They'll have abilities to reach out for housing, for employment, for mental health, for criminal justice, all located within each of these facilities. So this is where the paradigm takes a big shift. And then there's, of course, the administration. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for offices and meeting and workstations and conference room for the administration, but also the bigger part of the people who actually spend time here are volunteers, and there'll be space for volunteers as far as places to meet, places for them to have breaks. There is also going to be full food service at both of these facilities. So there'll be a commercial kitchen, and there'll be a place for dining, and then that dining can also be used as a common areas during the daytime, with the intent of serving 3 meals a day. And there'll be a place for donations. All of these facilities, the communities have always been very generous and very actively involved in making donations to our current shelters. We're going to continue this and enhance this. There'll be a place to take donations, to receive them, to sort through, to store, and then to distribute to our homeless clients. And then, of course, we're not allowed to forget mechanical, electrical, general building, recycling center. So those are the main components of both of our Salt Lake City sites, and actually for all three centers, but we're just talking about the 2 tonight for Salt Lake City's public engagement. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to take you through, it's going to be a little hard to see, but I think I've got some close-up plans. I'd like to take you through the actual floor plans of each site, how the site is going to situate with the building orientation, and then show you on a conceptual level what the buildings are looking like. And I keep telling everyone that I'm talking to, and I'm talking to a lot of the neighbors on a daily basis, the design process is this long, and we are right about here. We're maybe 15–20% through the design process. So is there still opportunity to improve, enhance, make anything that we're showing tonight better? Absolutely. And that's what we're looking for from everyone who's here tonight, whether it's through the conversations that we're going to have with the panelists, or comments that you can leave behind, or comments that you can share with us both tomorrow night for the 700 South site and Thursday night for the High Avenue site. We are in the early stages of design, and we're looking for ways that the community can help inform us on how to enhance and improve the design direction that we're heading down. So starting with the 700 South site. This particular site, let me find that magic button, here we go, is located along 700 South and State Street. It's where the DI building is currently located. And we evaluated how to organize our buildings on each of these sites. We looked at a one-level building, and it really didn't fit. And we looked at a two-level building, and it fit pretty well. And we looked at a three-level building, which gave us more site left over. But the problem with three-level is programmatically, it was hard to arrange all the spaces, all the functions, all the adjacencies, the flow, the security, all those vision words that I just went through didn't work very well on a three-story. So both of these locations are two-story buildings. You will also see, I'll probably spend a little more detail on this site just to get you oriented with how the spaces are, and then you'll see the same spaces, just rearranged differently for the second site. So on the 700 site, the way this is, whoops, let me go back to the site plan. The way this is laying out is we'll have a main entrance here for vehicles, and we'll also have an entry here. And then just for safety, for fire security, full circulation around the site on the interior of the site. The entrance of the building will be right off of 700 South. And we've designed for both of these centers 3 entry points. We have an entry point for our homeless clients. We have an entry point for deliveries, whether it's for the food function or for the storage and donations function. And then we have a staff and a volunteer entry. And just for circulation and flow, the 3 entries seem to work well. I know that the VOA Youth Center has very similar organization, and it seems to be working quite well at that location. And then there's also going to be a secure exterior courtyard that's associated to the inside common areas of each of these buildings. So again, keep in mind it's a 2-story building. And this is kind of an overall first floor plan, and then I'll get a little bit more closer to the inside. But we have our entry and intake, we have donations, we have dining and common and kitchen, we have the bunk area, and then we have a lot of our service providers. So if you keep this area in mind, I'm going to zoom in on that real quick, and you kind of see here on the overall floor plan, we're right down here where this gold area is. So the intent is when you come in as a homeless client, there's a large staging area on the inside. Again, we're not anticipating, because of this paradigm shift in how people will be served in these facilities and the ability to stay in these facilities full-time. When I say full-time, 24 hours a day, we're not anticipating a lot of queuing or outside waiting. Once you're checked in, you're able to come and go through your ID system quite easily without standing in any type of lines. There's going to be full-time security on site, and there's also going to be police presence, and we have those located around the front. I mentioned that we're going to be able to store bikes, so if you come in with your bike, you have a place right inside for secure bike storage. This is a check-in area here, kind of our control counter, and then a very large, it's hard to see scale-wise, but one of these, not 2 of these, but one of these doors is 3 feet, so you can start doing the math. A very large storage area, again, for the client's needs, so that they can have their personal belongings. It'll be organized and sorted through, but a nice, safe, secure place to keep it on site. This area right here is essentially all glass. And again, it's very critical for the safety, for the dignity, for the personalization of these spaces, to bring daylight in, to be seen and to see and be seen, to have a lot of daylight, natural light, and glass. So this is our outside courtyard area with the dining just off, and the dining can also be used as a common areas during the daytime. Over here, if you remember the site plan, there's a vehicle access. You can pull in, back your car in, do your donation drop-off, and then we do the sorting, the cleaning, the storage, and the distribution to the clients. And then this is kind of back of the house with food storage as well as a commercial kitchen. Let me now jump again. If you think about the overall floor plan that I showed you, we're in this front half. I'm going to jump to the back half, and this blue part will continue in the back half. This is our bunk area. Now, this site, 700 South, is our women's shelter. 200 beds. So there'll be 200 women only at this location. It's not one great big room with 200 beds. The intent is to break up our bunk area with a combination of bunk beds and single beds, and to break it up into smaller components for many reasons: for control, for privacy, for personalization, for special needs. If there's a handful of people that have the flu and you want to isolate them, we can isolate them into smaller rooms. So again, this more humane, dignity type environment. The ceiling in this area is taller than your average ceiling, to allow, again, to get away from that cramped, tight space, to allow that personal dignity, to bring in more daylight, to help with more mechanical ventilation. And then right in the center here is the personal hygiene area for showers, water closets, lavatories. Everything here in this kind of gold color is part of our service provider area. Again, if you remember the site plan over here, there's this kind of loop, and there's an entry right here. Along this area is where 4th Street Clinic can park their mobile medical unit. They're going to have 3 exam rooms within that unit, and then we're also having a 4th exam room within the building. So the health component is kind of zoned and located right here off of the common area and the bunks. And then the client providers, the service providers, case managers, again, right on the first floor with full access to our clients. When you go upstairs, so here's the stairs that take you up to the upper level. We have administration. This is a great big X'd area because it's our higher ceiling area where the bunk areas are. So there's no space there. We've got some support and mechanical and storage. This is our day use common area. So again, instead of saying, okay, it's time for everybody to leave the building because we have to clean the bunks, we're not doing that. We're basically saying it's time to clean the buildings. You can go to the common areas, you can go to the computer lab, you can meet with your case managers, service providers will be here during this time. There are various areas and functions and abilities within the building to give the resources to the people as they need them, to our clients. So this is, again, conceptually where we are with the 700 South. We've been very fortunate to have a significant donor to this site. You'll see in the next rendering, we're calling this the Geraldine E. King Women's Resource Center. What we're trying to do with the architecture of this site is on this kind of first level, we want it to be very scaled to a pedestrian level. We want it to be very durable materials, so we're looking at different types of brick. We want it to have a lot of daylight, a lot of glass, a lot of see and be seen. And then on the upper level, we'll be going with kind of softer materials also. A lot of stepping in and out, stepping back and forth, again, to blend into the community, to not feel institutional, and to make it feel, very pedestrian scale. So what we're looking at from that same view with a little bit more architecture to it is a 2-story building with the main entry kind of located right in this area. Okay, breathe, everybody breathe. Okay. Let's go to the second one. The second one is High Avenue Paramount. And I'm starting to call it High Avenue Paramount because every time I call it High Avenue, people get all these ideas that everything is off of High Avenue. And in fact, the entry on this one has been located on Paramount. And the main reason is because of the solar orientation of the building. There are some strategies to properly orienting a building on site with solar gain and how we can use the sun and how we can enhance our entry with a southern entrance, our courtyards with southern exposure. So this particular site is not as simple to solve because of the kind of very irregular configuration of the site. But we have High Avenue on the north, we have Paramount on the lower level. And Paramount is where our main client entrance will be. The building is oriented in this area right here, with the entry happening at this location. Vehicles can come in and drive, again, around the site and out through High Avenue. Right here is where the 4th Street Clinic mobile medical unit can park to serve our clients. We come around here to donations and then also to the staff and volunteer entry. So again, very similar components, very similar organization as the Women's Resource Center. This particular building is a men and women's. It's 200 beds, but we are anticipating a majority of men over women. So probably right now we're planning for flexibility, but we're also planning for maybe 80% men, 20% women. So it's for couples and then also for single men. When you look at the floor plan, all the same components, just reshuffled. So you have, oops, sorry, these buttons are a little bit tricky for me. So again, with your overall floor plan, you've got intake, you have donation, kitchen and dining, client and provider services, bunk. So when we get close up, starting at the entry area, same components. At the main entry, we have security presence, we have police presence, bike storage, client storage, intake, this long, nice glass hallway corridor that opens up to a secure courtyard so that clients can come kind of inside and outside from both the dining and commons area. Kitchen, donation, drop-off and storage and receiving and distribution back here, and then moving into the client provider services. Shifting back towards the back of the building, we have, once again, the bunk area, same description. On this facility, due to security and also licensing requirements, even though this facility is for couples, we need to have separate sleeping accommodations. So as a couple at this facility, you will have separate sleeping, but all of your other day uses are together. So on this level, this is the men's bunk area. Again, you will see broken into smaller components for all the reasons I stated earlier, and then the hygiene area here in the center. When you go upstairs, kind of the same idea, you come up the main stairs, and here's our day use common area, administration and support, and then our program spaces, again, for computer labs, for classrooms, for seminars, for teaching and opportunities and counseling experience for our clients, also a community room. And then as you move a little bit towards the back, we have the remaining beds, which are right now for women, but there'll be flexible uses up here depending on how the population shifts, and kind of central hygiene area for the women bunks. And then this will also be the main office for Shelter the Homeless. Shelter the Homeless needs a home, and we decided that this location would be the best location for Shelter the Homeless. So again, very similar in regards to the concept of developing the architecture for the building. We want the lower level to be very much pedestrian scale of a humane entry. What does a humane entry mean? You know, soft, welcoming materials, a lot of daylight, a lot of seen and be seen, durable materials back to the masonry, and then softer materials up high. So right now, for this particular site, this is what the architecture is looking like. So that's as far as we've taken it. As I mentioned at the beginning, what we're looking for is all kinds of ideas and recommendations on how to improve, how to enhance, how to make what we are showing right now even better. You know, my staff is here. I've got Steve and Deanna and Connor here. They're going to be outside later. All of these images will be on boards posted outside this room. So please feel free to talk to all of us, share your ideas, and please come to the additional public forums both tomorrow night and Thursday night.
What I'll do as everybody's getting settled is if you weren't here at the beginning, the instruction was to write your questions up here, and if you were in agreement with someone else's question, to put a dot by it. So in the name of transparency, we wanted to put your questions right out there. I'm not filtering them, but we do just want to get to as many as we can so that we can get answers to you. So it looks like off the top that this question here is the one that the most people agreed with. So I'm going to read it out for our panel, and then I'll kick it to you all to decide who knows best on these answers. So, are we making certain that buildings comply with Medicaid specifications in case we ever get Medicaid? In case we ever get Medicaid, and they will pay. So I think we heard a little bit from Jill on that, but are there other details about that anybody on the panel wants to share? I think you have to flip the little switch. Where's our guy?
Hello? Okay. I don't have a specific answer to that. We have been working very closely with our currently planned health provider, which is 4th Street Clinic, and they are helping us making sure that the building supports the mobile medical unit that they're bringing to the building, another exam room, medical supplies, queuing and waiting inside the building for the clients to visit with 4th Street, but we have not got into the detail of if the building will support Medicaid or Medicare requirements. This is still a temporary, the health component is still kind of a first step, first response to the needs of our clients, and if they do need to be more, I want to say severe, maybe that's too severe of a word, but if they need to be more aggressive, they will go long-term to 4th Street Clinic or more advanced medical facilities.
Okay. All right, so looks like, I'll jump to this one here.
Well, can we,
Sorry?
just one follow-up to
Yes,
that?
of course.
One of the issues with Medicaid is there's an IMD rule, and this was based out of deinstitutionalization back in the 70s, where they didn't want massive institutions anymore, and so for federal dollars, and so they said, well, you can only have up to 16 beds if you're going to get Medicaid reimbursement, which means you can't have a facility with more than 16 beds. And that's pretty hard and fast at this point. Now, as providers, when I worked for VOA, and Kathy probably has talked about this more recently, that there's a lot of push to see if there's some flexibility in those rules, but currently there's not. And so you're stuck with the conundrum of, do you take traditional Medicaid dollars but have a very small facility, which scalable, we can't do, or do you try and do what we can with the numbers we need to hit and then work maybe on the back end with our funding? And so there's a sort of dilemma we're in right now with that, I think.
Okay. So actually, I'm gonna stick with the general questions, and then I'll jump to site specific, so we kind of go in a bit of an order. So, are you willing to mandate that all new construction will have a percentage of affordable units? There's some follow-up here, but I'll start with just that question. Are you willing to mandate that all new construction apartments will have a percentage of affordable units? Isn't this essential?
The resource centers will not have apartments in them, and these resource centers are designed for kind of like your first step. We're looking to utilize the county's program to move people through a resource center model that is about 60 days. And so there is no housing per se. This is a resource center that allows for people to become stabilized, for those who are providing client care to be assessed and then matched with services that are needed.
Okay. I meant to, before we move to the next person, there's also a number of Salt Lake City staff members in the back. We have our panelists here who are in the hot seats, but they also have staff out here. So if there are resources in the room that we want to call on, feel free to do so. They're all here to help. So
I know this isn't quite on topic with the resource centers, but you're talking about housing. And I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for, I think, Derek Kitchens here in the audience tonight as well from the City Council. This is inclusionary zoning concept, right, where you mandate that any new construction would have some percentage of affordability, depending on what you define as affordable, right? It's a very controversial in some areas. In my personal opinion, I think we need to talk about that. We need to talk about having an expectation of some affordability, and then also look at how do we help developers incentivize that and make it pencil. I think there are ways to do that. We have this, I believe, is one of the pieces of the Salt Lake City Housing Plan we've been talking about going forward, but we still have a lot of discussion at a city council level. So as your input, as you like to give us your input, please do. In writing or come to the meetings. We broadcast when the topic will come up. Please let us know your thoughts on this and how to make this work, because, and again, my personal opinion, I think we have to have some expectations to make this more pervasive across the entire city and the county and the state. I know there's some talk at the legislature this year about having some more, that's a good term, incentives or some pressure for everyone to start talking more about this across the entire state, because it's not just a Salt Lake City issue. This is the entire system. We're short on housing everywhere. And unless we start talking about this in a more overt and direct, concrete way like this, I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on that one? Okay, so I don't think we have any others in this general category that that have dots. So I'm going to start here. How much input will people experiencing homelessness have with how the shelters are operated?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. I think throughout the last couple of years, there have been various points where we've done client engagement. I've done some different focus groups with clients, both at Family Promise, which is a small kind of homeless shelter that works with different religious organizations throughout the county. So we've done some different, and as well as at 4th Street Clinic, done different focus groups there, talked to people about what their primary needs were. We've done large-scale assessments in the Rio Grande area to talk to people about what they most need, what they would like to see happen, what they see some of their biggest issues are, and how we could help address them. And then, Jill, of course, will be meeting this week with clients, whoever's interested at St. Vincent de Paul's. We also have a consultant that we're working with who works with homeless shelters nationally, who was formerly homeless and is also probably has seen more different homeless shelters and different types of resource centers than anyone else. He does it all over, and he's been giving us a lot of great advice and input. So I think we've done what we've tried to do, what we could up to this point. I think we certainly need to continue to have more engagement. I know Jill has been so wonderful as far as being willing to meet and talk with whoever's interested, and that's kind of what we continue to try to do, to reach out, at some of these decision points like this and get different input. But I think that's something we could do better on. I think we need a constant feedback loop there, but I do think there has been a substantial engagement, and that'll continue to be a priority for us.
Just another quick piece. With the resource center model that you got a quick glimpse of tonight, we're at a point, too, where we can take that to groups of people who are staying at our detox center, for example, and I think it's a good reminder. I appreciate the question, and I know that the other service providers for Step House is here, and with the Road Home, and certainly St. Vincent's and so forth, Catholic Community. I have a meeting with them tomorrow morning, and I will talk with them about how we can organize some focus groups and conversations with clients in programs related to this service model.
Okay, great. There's a general question. So over here, these are questions that the community at large has been sending in to the mayor's office over time. So these are more general questions that we've been hearing time and time again. We were just nervous that we weren't going to have enough questions. So we also grabbed from those as well, just in case. And there's a great overarching question there that leads to some of these that I want to start with, which is, how can neighbors address concerns about the centers once they open? So there's a number of specific concerns here from neighbors, and I kind of want to address it generally first, and then we'll drill down to some of the more specifics.
I think, one thing that we're thinking about and kind of working on is Midvale. They have the family shelter, and they have a great system where they meet very regularly with service providers, with law enforcement, with city leaders and elected officials, and they do that, I think, every month. I've just barely started attending those.
It's monthly.
As representing Shelter of the Homeless, I've just started going to those, and they have a great response, very kind of responsive relationship between the service providers, the elected officials, and law enforcement. So I think they potentially have a great model that we could start to look at here. I think we will, again, getting back to these client, to the client feedback, that, Shelter of the Homeless is it's been around for a long time, but has not been staffed. So I think one area where we see that we can add value is by creating these formal community engagement opportunities. So something like that, as well as how do we interact with the neighborhoods, potentially with community councils and with clients. So I think that's something that has yet to be worked out formally. But I think we have a good model there, and it'll be something that we continue to work on especially as we get a few additional staff that could specifically be working on some of those models. So.
Since the city has jurisdiction over land use, where these are going to be placed, we've been working on zoning pieces, right? This is a conditional use permit, essentially, and in that permit, you can specify certain expectations of the facility. And for a resource center facility, the draft right now includes language along the lines of a stakeholder group that would consist of certain individuals in the neighborhood, and it calls out certain individuals, but it wouldn't be limited to them, that would meet regularly with management of the facility itself. There's also some language in there in this draft version that would mandate that they would keep a log of community input, either complaints or anything else that came from the community about the operation of that center, and that would be kept, addressed, and then also reported to the Shelter of the Homeless organization, at least on an annual basis, and then also talk about in there what the resolution has been, how they're handling that. So there's a feedback loop that way that's documented that we would have on record. So that if you had a concern that you wanted to make sure that it got followed up on, you could track it through this system and know that it was being addressed on multiple levels. We're still taking feedback on that as well. So please, if you have ideas, let us know quickly and how we can make this more effective right now before we get into this, because it's much easier now to set it up in a way we want it and then subtly change it after the fact than try and do a full revamp later on.
And as far as law enforcement, I was very happy to see the offices inside these resource centers. That makes us very happy because we are part of these communities also. And we want to be engaged with what's happening on the inside as well as what's happening on the outside to the community and to the citizens that these resources sit in. The officers in the back, Josh and Bryce, raise your hand. That's our Community Intelligence Unit detectives. And Sergeant Gil Arnez, is he still here? Did he slip out? There you are, Gil. But each council district has one of these officers assigned. Oh, and there's a few more, sorry. But these officers, I hope, will be very engaged in conversations with the community and the resource center so that we have those very critical conversations and the dialogue that needs to be present so that we can manage all the concerns, but in particularly the law enforcement concerns.
I just want to jump in quick because both what Andrew is saying and Chief Brown, I mean, I think that dovetails really well into what, kind of what we're trying to do currently, which is to have better integration between security in the facilities and local law enforcement so that we can, make sure that clients are safe and that neighborhoods and communities are safe. So we're trying to currently work on closer collaboration and better coordination of services. And like Andrew was saying, in terms of the conditional use with the community engagement, the City Council has also requested a security plan as part of that Shelter of the Homeless would present a security plan, which would include collaborating with law enforcement officials, with security, with providers and operators, so that we do have a more integrated system where it's much more kind of fluid and it's not just law enforcement does one thing, security does one thing, but that we really have an integrated plan that will better meet the needs of both clients and communities. So I think that's very much part of the planning for services that we're looking at in the areas.
I still feel a need to add one other thing. At the Youth Resource Center, we did all of this that suggested, and then sometimes I think there are different processes that get developed. In one, our neighbors to the north, the apartment complex, we have requested that they call the manager on site if they have something they want to share with us, and that manager is the liaison with Volunteers of America, and we have assigned a person to accept calls from the neighbors, and then any neighbor, essentially we need to tell people who to call. And so I think we can make that commitment to figure out the processes and let the neighbors know who am I supposed to call when I see something. And we're doing that now, so we can share that.
Okay, great. I'm going to jump to a more specific question. In the neighborhood around 1400 South and 200 East has apartments used to rehouse homeless. Will they still be used for that when the new shelters open? Are there changes to rehousing options that come along with the resource center change, or will those all stay in place?
I'm not aware of any changes that have been requested or zoning changes, or I don't
So not that we know of at this time, there's no
Right.
changes to those rehousing options that are associated directly with this resource center change.
That housing unit that is there today is, I honestly, I have not heard that there's any request to change the housing that they are doing.
Okay, that's a fair answer.
Yeah, if there's a clarification on the question, it might help a little bit, but.
Yeah, and do we have the person here who asked this question? Is there a clarification?
I know there's a couple parts.
Can you guys hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's my understanding that they're primarily used in rehousing efforts, which would explain kind of the issues that have gone on with those businesses.
Okay.
And that my neighborhood is kind of in the center of these two buildings that we're talking about. So I was wondering if there's going to be any changes for that. But it sounds like that's a different question.
Okay. Sounds like maybe that's a question we don't have the answer to today. And then we have another question here about how neighbors are being informed about the resource centers. We have a business owner who was just informed today. So can anybody speak about the process by which neighbors to these resource centers are being notified? I don't know if the folks on the panel or if staff have answers to that question about how we're informing neighbors, what that process looks like.
I think the council members in those areas have actually been very helpful because I think they're well-known in those areas, and business owners and clients have reached out to them, and then they've put us in touch. Jill has been wonderful. She's been meeting with 24/7 with whoever wants to meet with her, and I mean, we're happy to meet with whoever. So, you know, if people want to speak with someone in the short term, especially those business owners, I think they've been able to get in touch. I think maybe not on as fast a time.
Okay.
Because that was my comment.
Uh-huh.
Not one person, not one letter was I ever informed that the entrance to this would be directly across from my business. Not once in this whole process. While this guy was patting himself on the back for the process, there's 4 businesses on our street. Do you think we could have had the courtesy of an official letter of a human being? I mean, I accidentally came here because one of my staff gave me this flyer. Had no idea. So this thing about getting people involved in the process, it must be incredibly broad. You want to talk about trauma-informed design? I'm traumatized. I mean, this is the first day, and I'm incredibly emotional because my whole life is in this business, and I am zoned very specifically. I have to be in an industrial area. There's all this rezoning to transit-oriented development I can't move to. I could have had the courtesy of notice so that I couldn't keep pouring money into the building that I own. I mean, I am just, this is unbelievable to me.
Okay. It sounds like you've had we have some
Yes,
frustration here about how
and-
you're informed.
We will touch base with you for sure, and then I'll make sure that we do a better job of reaching out to all the businesses in the neighborhoods. I know we have been out, but,
I was informed today, the only reason I knew, somebody from the
Right.
Salt Lake Tribune called my business to ask for a comment. That's how I found out.
okay. I know we've been out trying to reach business owners. I apologize that you did not have a direct conversation. We will meet with you today for sure, get your information and create opportunity not only for you to meet with Shelter the Homeless and dialogue with us as a board, but also with Jill, who is
So make sure that we have your name, and please stay and make sure you talk with the people who have the answers that you need.
Yeah, I'm glad to meet with you. A letter went out almost 3 weeks ago from the city to the community. I don't know why you were not on that letter, but it basically said for everyone in that area that I personally am willing to meet with anyone at any time. I believe that Janelle sent the email that said Jill's available anytime, and I have met with 4 business owners so far. I met with one this morning again, and I'm more than welcome to sit and meet with you.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, I understand your frustration and what you're feeling. And I mean, Jill obviously is helping with the design. They're creating and designing a beautiful building. A lot of what your concerns will be how this is run going forward. And that I hope that we can, like Mayor Moskupski offered, have an ongoing dialogue and a good relationship with us, as well as with any security or law enforcement, so that if there are any issues, we can address them.
I'm planning on losing my business, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm planning on losing it.
Well-
That's what I'm planning. Because there was no eminent domain enforced. There was nothing. My property value has now, whatever I put into it is completely gone, including what I spent on it. So
That's
I'll
actually-
end up in one of these, I guess.
That's actually a great transition too, because I think this is your handwriting over here as well. So maybe we can jump to the High Avenue site questions, because I'm seeing some commonality over here with these questions about property value. And so I see your question here about the money that you've put in and the devaluation. I see a second question here about property devaluing of property associated with the siting of these sites.
So we did some investigating into properties that are around resource centers in the state. Our assessment is not showing that result. And we can show you some data on that, which was gathered in the spring while we were doing the site selection process. And again, we have staff here who can meet with you and make sure you see some of that.
Okay, so it sounds like, go ahead, before we do that, I just want to say, I think some of these are very personal and specific and very emotional issues. So while that's why everyone is here, that's why they're going to be here in the next couple of days to talk with people individually. We don't want anybody to feel like you're being put off here publicly, but some of them are going to be very specific issues, especially when it comes to your property value and things that are very specific to your home, to your property and your site. So, sorry.
No, thank you. And I think, like I said, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I mean, we really do hope that the plan has been that these resource centers will operate, very differently, will look very differently than what we're currently seeing. I understand it's not been, ideal. We talk about the streetscape in the Rio Grande area, and it's been problematic, and people are scared about that coming to their neighborhoods. So I completely understand that. Our intent is that it be a very different situation and a very different feeling in those neighborhoods, that it feel like a safe place, and that our commitment, Shelter the Homeless, we recently revised our organization, our bylaws. Previously, our mission was to hold asset-owned facilities for the benefit of the homeless, and we added on to that mission to provide accountability for communities and neighborhoods. So that's our commitment. That's part of Shelter the Homeless's mission. And again, is something that we value, that we're looking at this holistically, not just, how can we better serve clients? That's a huge part of what we're trying to do, but how can we get better outcomes for neighborhoods? So we'll be specifically looking at and reporting on things like property values, on things like incidences of crime, or what are people seeing, so that we can have a very public-facing, easy to understand, dashboard, or so that people can see what is happening, and so that you can hold, all of us accountable for what's happening and say that this isn't working, this isn't what you said would happen here. So what do we need to do to revisit? So we're going to try to be much more transparent and open about that process, and we hope to work closely with those of you in the neighborhoods, and I hope that gives you a little bit of.
So we have maybe time for
And
one more
ma'am-
comment on this
And
question.
ma'am, you have the commitment of the Salt Lake City Police Department. I mean, safety and security is paramount, as Mayor DePaul talked about. Safety, safety, safety. It's not only the safety of those inside the shelter, it's the safety of your businesses and the people that come down to visit your business, and you have our commitment. I've had conversations with Mayor Biskupski, and it's a high priority for her and us that that we just don't slice off a piece of Rio Grande and say, now it's in your neighborhood. It can't be that way. It's got to be different, and you have my commitment, and I know you have the mayor's commitment that it won't be that way.
For the past year, when I talk about conditional use, it's sort of boring to most folks. Basically what it means is that you can use this property if you follow these conditions. And we're writing as a city this specific conditional use permit for shelters, and they have to have very specific things that won't allow them to devolve into other things. So one of them is that there's a hard cap on numbers. In this location, it will say there's not more than 200 beds. There's other things in that conditional use I mentioned earlier that say there's got to be feedback mechanisms. You have to be able to talk to somebody 24 hours a day, like Kathy talked about. You have to be able to address your concerns very immediately. You have to talk about the environmental impact. Is there landscaping? Are there curb and gutter? I mean, are there things like that, just nuts and bolts stuff for a neighborhood that matter? And when Derek Kitchen from District 4 and Aaron Mendenhall from District 5 have been talking about, especially Aaron Mendenhall, about a redevelopment area that includes this portion of it, State Street and also 3rd West around the shelter, so that specific tax increment goes into that neighborhood to maintain it and to improve it. So from a city perspective, we're trying to say we have to take physical money, but take money and be able to use it in that area to make sure it maintains and it gets better, actually. Having a new building helps that, but also how you run it, what they're talking about, but also everything else around it. Do we pay for the infrastructure around that to make it livable, to make it enjoyable for folks, to come and do business there still? There's a lot of, and that corridor of 3rd West, people don't realize, is a massive tax increment for the city. A ton of our income comes from that corridor. We can't mess it up. We can't. It really affects our bottom line, and so we have to put our assets back into that through these entities. So as you hear about a CDA, a redevelopment area, the State Street redevelopment area, this is part of that. And as you hear about that and you want input, talk about what you want to see in that area about improvements, infrastructure improvements, curb, gutter, sidewalk, lighting, whatever it is, and give that feedback so that it gets in there and we do it, so that it doesn't become what we fear.
Thanks. So with the time we have left, I want to make sure we get to site-specific questions. So we have one over here for 700 South that looks like a couple people felt strongly about, is that there's a school 1 block away from this site. So perhaps this is a question for the chief, that how will that area be monitored once the shelter opens? And what happens if the shelter is full? And I love this last part, is how can we be a good neighbor for the experience? So maybe that's a good one for Chief Brown to start with, is how will that area be monitored near the school?
Well, right now we have 4 bike squads that are assigned to the Rio Grande Depot District. And what I envision is when these resources centers come online, that we take those bike officers and those squads and put them into these areas and these neighborhoods just as that, to monitor those areas and make sure that the safety and security of all is being addressed. So if there's a school down the road, we need to be very cognizant of what's happening down there. If there's any problems that are arising, if they're, into this lady's concerns, if there's a problem with a business, we need to be able to talk about those things too. So I would expect not only just the bike squads, the CIU officers, but that there would be a very open and direct conduit to the police department to look at these issues and concerns.
Okay, great. I'll take one more of these specific questions, and I have a kind of a general question that we might wrap with, is will there begin to be more regulation with the transient hotels on State Street? Because there's some other processes going on with the State Street area right now. So is there going to be more regulation with that State Street area of the transient hotels?
I know that the city's writing an ordinance, I don't know if it's finished yet, someone must remind me of this, it's finalized, a nuisance ordinance, so that there's more teeth to reporting nuisance issues around hotels and other issues. Specifically, we talked about North Temple and State Street, all right? If you have a place that has multiple issues, problems, police, calls out there, public disturbance issues, whatever it is that's tracked, and there's actually some teeth to enforce problems with property owners. So the owner of the motel, for instance, you have to be held accountable if you have multiple calls to your place within a certain amount of time, within a certain year, you have multiple violations. The city can actually enforce that better now. Now, I don't know that we're all there to fix it. I think this is a step towards that. I know the mayor's done some work about the Blue Ribbon Commission on Housing to say, can we get more housing in areas like that? So we're not just displacing people who actually are living there. There's a lot of folks who live there. That's the way they survive off the street. But get better housing, perhaps, that's affordable, because a lot of those places aren't affordable month to month. Not just sort of displace, but improve in a lot of ways.
So to Andrew's point, we are working diligently to make sure that we get some projects in front of the RDA board, which is our city council members, to consider supporting so we can get affordable housing online. We want to make sure that as people are transitioning in and out of a resource center, that there is an affordable unit for them to transition to or rapid rehouse to. And that means creating some housing that is 40% area median income and below. And that's going into some of the project ideas that we have that will be presented here in the not too distant future to help us make sure that as we serve this population, as we work to close the road home, the people have a place to land and they can get back to being healthy and independent and move to yet another step in this process toward employment, toward housing that doesn't require permanent supportive housing. But we do have some permanent supportive housing coming in Salt Lake City to help with some of the members that we know are in the homeless population who will need that. And some of that is coming in Salt Lake City and some of that is coming outside of Salt Lake City.
And to that point, a lot of these things are great. I mean, the housing things that we're doing, Mayor and Councilmember Johnson, the things that you're talking about. But rest assured, the Salt Lake City Police Department has been very active in that area over the last year. Gil, who has District 5? Okay, if you'll get with him, he can talk about some of the things that we've done down there through our operations and just increasing our presence, because we have seen over the last year a drop in crime to about 10% along that stretch, which is great.
Great. There was a couple additional questions attached to that, and that I want to make sure we get to is what happens if the shelter is full, and how can neighbors in the area be good neighbors and support this process? So what happens if it's full, and how can they be good neighbors?
Well, I think if the shelter's full, I mean, each of these shelters have that hard cap. So they're going to be capped at 200, 200, and 300. So, I mean, that's not something we can go over. So I think, again, when we talk about what are we, you know, what's a role for Shelter the Homeless and reporting on some of these community and neighborhood metrics or outcomes that people want to see, and also in terms of how the shelter is operating. What are we looking at in terms of capacity, being very transparent about that. And also, what are we looking at in terms of, you know, length of stay and how long are people staying and what some of those issues. So a lot of that is going to be really working towards this housing first model. We need more affordable housing. That's, you know, the primary cause of people that don't have homes. They don't have a house. So working on developing more affordable housing is a huge piece of this. And then doing what we can to find and create efficiencies in the service system that help people better move to housing. So the services in these resources will help to encourage people to move towards housing. There'll be people helping to locate housing, people helping clients get their paperwork in order so that they can be ready when housing is available, and addressing immediate needs so that they could be able to be housed, where they can actually maybe be able to receive the services they need in a more stably housed environment, not within a shelter. So again, it's a different service model that we're looking at, where we're really hoping to shorten length of stays, have it be a temporary solution to a housing crisis, and then help people move on to a more stable housing situation.
Great.
At the risk of speaking for a provider, which I'm not, the providers have policies right now for when they get full. I mean, they have their processes in saying we prioritize certain people, say families, to go into a motel on a temporary basis to free up beds for singles. They have their own processes. Just because there's only 200 beds in a facility doesn't mean there's not a process to make sure everybody who needs something that night gets it. It starts from the beginning, like Janelle said, about when somebody comes to the shelter, calls up and says, I really need a place to stay, the first level is diversion. And we don't say divert just to divert. We say, are there any other resources you have that we can help you get to immediately, right now, tonight? And then Do you need immediately shelter in the building? Can we find the right place for you? Because in a my personal opinion, in a scattered site model, there's a place for everyone, but not every place is appropriate for everyone. And so finding the way through coordinated entry, which they talk about, to make sure everyone gets the appropriate place to stay right now. There might be some folks that just don't fit in some of these buildings for whatever reason. We don't have the right services for their needs. We're going to try very, very hard, I think, but we need to also have a little bit of flexibility on the edges as a provider. And the providers haven't been chosen yet, by the way. These are buildings. We don't know who's going to run them yet, who have the ability to be creative, humane, and figure out the right solution right then for everybody. And it may stretch us. I don't have the answers right now from my perspective, but we need to be able to move forward, get as much in place as possible, and then free up our resources to make sure we can hit those difficult situations that are more rare, hopefully, and especially as we go forward, more housing that are more and more rare.
Okay, so I'm going to cut that question off because we are running low on time, but a more broad question. Certainly people come to these engagement events with very specific questions in mind, very specific issues, and I know that we're not always, especially those of you on the hot side, can't always have every answer to every question right now, but I'd like to throw back to the panel. How can people be good neighbors? How can people stay engaged? What is the process for those questions to be answered? So how can we have people stick with us as we move forward in tackling this?
I'll start from my perspective. In running a resource center, we learned some things. We did some things maybe the wrong way. But what I would say, I would encourage you to continue to be involved and follow the conversation, take a look at the models, meet who the agencies are that are going to be running the facilities in your neighborhood. Come and take a tour of the facility when those are available, and give the service providers a chance to provide a solution to things that you are seeing or hearing, and that seems to be the way to try to partner with the service providers and get to know us. And because we're problem solvers and we want to be the first line of response.
Any other thoughts? Okay.
We also are creating for Shelter the Homeless Board a community advisory type board. And I think for someone like yourself that might be a great place for you to serve, to make sure that your concerns are really reaching far and deep into the system. I also want to say that the city will continue to be a place where you'll be able to contact us with any immediate concerns that need to be addressed, similar to what we are doing today with our operations in the Rio Grande neighborhood, where we want to know if there's an uptick in activity and what that is, so that we can send the right people to meet with individuals that are in a neighborhood that we aren't automatically assuming that they're criminals. We come with a more compassionate perspective to really try to get informed about their needs and create opportunities for them to be connected to resources. And I know Lana Dalton's here. She's been doing amazing work on behalf of Salt Lake City and our police department and her team. And that work will continue. And I want everyone to understand that what we're doing today as a city doesn't just turn off when the road home closes, that we will continue to provide a service level that really helps us be successful in this endeavor.
Okay. Well, that is the time that you've given us, so we don't want to overstay our welcome. But please know that our panelists and staff members are going to stick around, so we're going to break the formal session now. And there's going to be information out in the hallway, more information about Jill and her team's design. Her team is also here to answer more questions. So if we didn't get to your question tonight, please stick around and let's get you a path to getting your question answered. There's also, as a reminder, tomorrow is the 700 South on-site open house. Then Thursday is High Avenue and also the client event. So thank you very much for your time.